but I want to be focusing on this question. Should we worry about conspiracy theorists rejecting experts? And a disclosure, I might have been a bit sloppy spelling out every definition. When I talk about conspiracy theorists, I just mean people who believe in conspiracy theories. In the simple definition of conspiracy theory. So the question arises or comes from the worry that some researchers have expressed that conspiracy theories indeed do reject experts' testimony. And for example, psychologists and other social scientists have claimed that conspiracy theorists have a psychological predisposition to reject experts. Right. So my question is this worry well-founded, and is it urgent? If it is. And so to be able to answer this question, I think it's useful that what we need to do is break it down into two sub-questions or two other questions. First of all, we need to answer who is an expert on conspiracy theories? And second, how should a conspiracy theorist react to experts' testimony in order to be epistemically rational? And I want to look at both individually and socially. And a quick overview might be very dense, so I apologize if I go quickly past some sections, but a brief overview of what this presentation will look like. So I'll start off by saying something about the definition of experts. So what level are we concerned with to be able to answer the question that I started off with? Oh, is it changing by itself? Second, I will compare different theoretical accounts that we can find in the literature about what best social practices an individual can have or a social network. And there are mainly two that I'll be focusing on, the preemptive view and the community view. And then I will also restate these to fit the conspiracy theory discussion. And I will use or utilize a Bayesian simulation program, LaPuta, to investigate how these network structures come together. And LaPuta is after Gulliver's Travels, the island in Gulliver Travels, not the Spanish word. I didn't name the program though, but just the disclosure. And then I will summarize and see where we left. How can we answer the question? All said and done. So let's start with the definition of experts. So what is it to be an expert on conspiracy theories? I think there's three levels that we can analyze this notion of experts on conspiracies. First of all, someone can be an expert on a particular matter that is relevant to a conspiracy theory, right? So for example, someone could be an expert on the virus, SARS-CoV-2. And then of course that relates to maybe the Wuhan lab leak theory or other conspiracy theories. One can be an expert on ballistics, and that specialty will lend itself to the JFK assassination or other conspiracy theories. Second, someone can be an expert on conspiracy theory domain. And what I mean by that is a specific conspiracy theory. So for example, the Wuhan lab theory or the JFK assassination, a conspiracy theory about the JFK assassination. Could be historians, journalists, authors that have written about the specific domain of conspiracy theories. And thirdly, one can be an expert on conspiracy theories in general. And I don't mean being an expert on conspiracy theory academic literature, which many of you here are experts on. That's not what I'm concerned with here. But I mean instead just on conspiracy theories in general. Exactly the same. And I think this is still an open question, which is not totally uncontroversial. But I think it's an open question whether we can, or if we have identified them, if we indeed can have experts in this sense, in the third definition. Okay. But nevertheless, I still think that's the interesting one that we have to be able to answer or look at to answer the worry that we started off with, the question that I started off with. If it's a worry that conspiracy theorists reject experts. There isn't there's a feeling or there's a connotation in the literature and also elsewhere, for example, the European Commission and UNESCO, that there's an appeal to epistemic authority of some sort when it comes to conspiracy theories. So we can see that here. There's many examples. This is just a simple one because it was called a full poster. And so when they're trying to identify what is or what isn't a conspiracy theory, they appeal to recognized qualifications. Awesome. And we're supposed to know what that is. However, to be an expert on conspiracy theories in general, we need to make this distinction when we're talking on the third level between authority or some kind of officially endorsed theory and actual experts. So Dennis has written, I quote them directly, we should not confuse a theory's endorsement with it having any special epistemic character, because obviously it's two separate things. Continuing, there is no one group you can appeal to when appraising the conspiracy theory as a whole. And there are no accredited experts or even accredited institutions when it comes to conspiracy theories. And I agree with that. And I think how I interpret here is referring to expertise in the externalist sense. So just meaning that somebody knows more than somebody else. So knowing more than others is to be an expert in this sense. And that's what we can find in the accredited institutions. I don't think it's necessarily the case. I think it is the case, but I don't think it's necessarily the case, contingent, because we could have models of some sort that could tell us something about conspiracy theories in general. And thus someone who knows this model or can apply it would be an expert in this weak externalist sense of the term on conspiracy theories in general. Following Alvin Goldman's famous 1999 account. Okay, but then what conditions should be met to qualify as an expert? So I hinted at this external condition, and that condition is simply just a comparative matter, it's a comparative state of affairs, and there has to be a truth link to the relation to truth, and some minimum threshold has to apply or be added. So, for example, if a whole community knows nothing and one person or some people know one thing more than everybody else, we don't have the intuition that this person would be an expert just because they know one thing more than others. So there is this minimal threshold that has to be met for us to be able to, or for us to be like an expert. But the expert knows still somehow more than others. But as is very obvious, there is this threshold condition is very vague. So how do we even place that? So for this condition, the external condition, there's a problem to identify the experts. It's not a definitional problem because we have the definition, somebody who knows more than others on average, but it's difficult to identify them. On the internal condition, on the other hand, it's more of it's essentially a social phenomena, expertise. That's how they identify it. So an expert, sorry, that's wrong. So it's who the community or the social network take to be the experts. And all this boils down to really is trust. So trust becomes the key thing here. And of course, the reliability in the experts or of the experts is what matters. And a problem for the internal condition is then that reputation has little to nothing to do with actual expertise. Somebody could walk into town who's never been here, as total stranger, and know a lot about something. Maybe we would be inclined to call them an expert, but the society doesn't recognize them because they just arrived. So there seems to be a problem there, saying that. And then Jennifer Lackey has also coined or made the problem clear about the predatory expert problem, which is the problem because all it boils down to is trust, the internal condition. So I think this results in a dilemma for us. On the one hand, so if the worry is that conspiracy theorists reject experts' testimony, on the one hand, on the internalist view, we say a little more than these people these people are rejecting, who society has appointed or agreed upon as the experts. And it has little to no relation to facts. It's not a truth tracking process. We know philosophers like Habermas, Rorty, and others of this practical school have this skeptical view on experts. They argue that the knowledge that the experts claim to have is just another ideology. And what is presented as fact by these experts. It's merely what people agree to count as such. However, on the other view, as we saw, the externalist view, we don't know who the genuine experts are on conspiracy theories, at least. However, nonetheless, I think it's the only interesting option that we can go with here, the externalist view. If we want to be able to, like I already mentioned, answer our question, so then we need to take the third general definition of the experts on conspiracy theories and the external approach. And then moving on to the second step question that we need to answer, or that I think we should be able to answer to know if our worry is indeed urgent or not, is how should a conspiracy theorist react to experts' testimony to be epistemically rational? What would be the best social practice? And there are accounts on this in the literature, in the general sense, so not applying it to conspiracy theories, but in the general sense of how to implement an expert's testimony in social practice. And then that's the preemptive view and the community view. I'll start by looking at the preemptive view. So the preemptive view maintains that epistemic agents in a social network should bracket their own reasons and fully endorse or accept adapting the expert's testimony as their own. And the reasons that are provided by the experts, so to speak, preempt or defeat, totally overwrite other relevant reasons that the agent may have. John Hardwick says that when a layperson relies on an expert, that reliance is necessarily blind. And Linda Zagzewski's 2012 account or book famously brought this into the discussion of experts and epistemic authority in the philosophical debate. And her account is that the preemptive view of authority holds that a preemptive reason is a reason that replaces other reasons. So again, this idea of it being blind and totally deferring. And then treating the author's belief that P as just another reason among others to believe P will worsen my track record in getting the truth, is Linda Zagzewski's argument, why we should fully defer to the agents in this preemptive way. She tries to give some evidence for this, empirical evidence, and the example she gives or provides is the so-called maximizing rat example. So if we have a rat and we have this flashing green light, the rat discerns one choice as better the majority of the time, and it chooses that option that flashes the majority of the time, or that it's presented with the majority of the time. Whereas humans, we work a bit differently, and what we try to do is to match probability instead. So the example is then with the flashing green light, 75% of the time, a human will try to match that probability and choose green 75% of the time. Whereas rats will choose the option that flashes 75% of the time, the green choice, which will make the rat right 75% of the time, and humans, we will be much worse off because, or we will be worse off at least. So Linda Zagzewski's argument or thesis is that preemption leads to better results and is quickly learned by rats. We humans are not as smart, but because we resist it, and we are therefore outperformed by other mammals. Animals. Okay. If I try to reconstruct this or apply it to the conspiracy theory debate, it would maybe look something like this. That first of all, experts should take an initial skeptical position to conspiracy theories. Kassam's latest paper, 2023, hints at a similar intuition, I think. He says that a prima facie suspicion of conspiracy theories is justified. And the conspiracy theorists, as an independent source somehow, are mostly amateurs. So they have nothing to add to this. And Neil Levy, he writes that accepting experts' testimony is a far more reliable route to truth. So again, I think this Linda's intuitions is reoccurring here in conspiracy theory literature. So if I were to reconstruct this, it would be something like this. Conspiracy theorists should always defer to experts who typically have a prima facie suspicion towards conspiracy theories. But I think the analogy is totally misleading. I don't think it's correct. This comparison between the rat versus the human's actions is not actually analogous to the question of the best response that one could have to experts' post-dictions or predictions. It's typically talked about as predictions, but I'm writing post-dictions because that's obviously what they do with conspiracy theories. Anyway. So, in fact, for example, Morris and others have argued that the proper response to prediction is to actually update one's own credence on the forecast or on experts' testimony, rather than to defer to it. And in fact, for subjective Bayesian model to be able to apply at all, what is decisive as to whether or not to defer to the defer preemptively or to update on a forecast is what matters is the aim of the receiver. And this has been argued by George Masterton, who's also been at Lund University, who's argued that the right response depends on the circumstance. It's always something like that. But if the prediction is interpreted by the receiver as an external probability, as an assertion of objective chance, of course, one should defer to the prediction. However, if one is concerned to improve one's statistic values, and the prediction is interpreted as an internal probability of the expert, then one should update on the forecast. So just to, maybe I'm speaking a bit faster, just to help with it visually, why I think this is not analogous, is because this is what the preemptive view says, right? So we have the human and the rat, and they're looking at the world. And the world in this case was the light flashing 75% of the time. But with the experts, we have this third step that's missing. So the human is actually updating on whatever their interpretation is of the expert, and what the expert is, how the expert is interpreting the world. And we can have two readings on this. So we could have the objectivist reading or the subjectivist. If we take the objectivist reading or interpretation of the expert, if the human does, then the receiver would regard the expert as having external probabilities about the world. Let's say a weather forecaster or something. And if that's the interpretation, then the best strategy would be to defer. The problem with this is, like I've mentioned, I think it's the third time, of identifying the experts. So in this external subjectivist sense, we get a problem with identifying the experts. On the other hand, if we interpret the experts subjectively, then it's similar to like normal Bayesian updating on the expert's testimony. This is a very similar view that Jennifer Lackey is arguing for, where she talks about the experts as advisors rather than authority is what she calls it. Yeah, the preemptive, she calls it authority. So when we're concerned to actually improve our artistic value and we don't want to screen off evidence, we should update. And in this case, then we can identify the experts. Identifying the experts reduces to trust. And this is a very, you could make this argument very intuitively, but I just liked playing around with Laputa a bit. And I think it's also visually very helpful. So using a computer simulation to make these kind of arguments that can work with different agents and how they update their beliefs, I think is extremely helpful because you can do large numbers. Like that's what computation is good for, right? Crunching large numbers. And there's a lot of parameters in Laputa that we can use and change. But this is a very simple case. So what I've done here is so the green ones here are the experts, and they're communicating with these ones here. That's the agents. And I set it up as green is just P, the proposition P. And in this case, P is true. So the experts are right when they say P. And these are undecided. But if we set the trust level for the agents differently, so we could put a 0.2 degree of trust in experts, we'll get the red result. Of course, they will say not P. So if you don't trust the expert, you will just take a review of not P. And we see the middle one that I put to 0.5 is still undecided. And this one is, of course, if you trust the expert, you would update your belief and you will just take over the expert's belief and you will believe P. showing, so the only thing I really want to show you is that trust obviously matters for the outcome. Moving on then to the community view. A critical component of liberal democratic thought is that free speech is something almost, or it is a basic human right, free speech. And an influential rationale for this freedom of speech argument is the so-called argument for truth, from truth. And the argument is that the absence of government restrictions and other suppressions of publishing and so on in speech will, if we don't have this, the absence, it would increase the likelihood for truth in a community. This hinges on the assumption that truth will prevail when placed side by side with falsity. And there's also this idea of the free market societies. Applying it then to the conspiracy theory debate, we find this intuitions in the literature as well, and it's called the community view. I call it a community view approach, and it challenges the notion of attributing an institutional group expertise on conspiracy theories. The argument is that a network with open deliberation and free exchange of information about conspiracies is necessary to form beliefs that one can accept as true. And if I try to stream it down it's bullet pointed of the characteristics that would be prominent in such a view, it would be that it's lacking institutional features, it's made up of diverse agents, has to be improvised expertise, and conspiracy theories are treated on their own merits and seriously, and there should be this idea of free communication in the network, in the community. And just a restatement of it would be, under the community view, the experts would be a diverse and improvised group with unrestricted communication and with diverse opinions and conspiracy theories. So in this case, there's no problem of identifying the experts. The community is the experts. But how does it fare in simulation? And so if we were to simulate this, so this is the nice thing with actually be able to use Leopard or such a computational program. Because I ran this 10,000 times for each community, and you can vary the size and everything. I just did a very basic sample here of what it could look like to show what the results would be. Just play this video quickly. Okay. And this is what it looks like. So, like I mentioned, green is agents in the network that start to believe P, or believe P, and the green ones, the red ones, don't believe P. They are not P. So it's either, we don't see many yellows in there, as you can see. And I just want to show you as well what happens. So now it works really quickly, it crunches all the information. I want to just skip ahead to show you how quickly they work out. So here I'm doing it step by step rather than just running the program. And you can see already there, see, on the 5th or 6th step, we already have a polarized community. So almost everybody turns red or green pretty fast in this simulation. There we go. But the result is, of course, if we have this green and red divided society or network, that we have no increased artistic values. So Olsen argues that nothing comes from nothing. Some say garbage in, garbage out. So we can see that even though, or if we set the inquiry accuracy to 0.5, we have a distribution of initial priors uniformly. And all other parameters, I was just letting it vary randomly. But most people are truth tellers. I assume that most people in these communities are truth tellers. They say P if their degree of P exceeds 0.9, so they don't lie, basically. Okay. But what we saw is that we need something positive, like we need a positive inquiry accuracy to be able to have any sort of increased artistic value in these societies. So as expected, basically what it shows is that in a society where we have these random variables and the inquiry accuracy is 0.5, we have a 0 improved artistic value. And we can maybe go into this in the Q&A because I'm running out of time. what exactly is meant by this, but I'm just totally using Goldman's terms here and the definition of artistic value. So with the community view then, we may have solved the problem of identifying the experts, but at a cost of not having any increased artistic value. And it doesn't matter if people communicate freely, or they trust each other, and so on. And we also saw that polarization occurs pretty quickly. If our main aim is to increase artistic value, then the community approach is not to recommend. And I think Dendit has hinted at this, or has, obviously saw it, when they write that the benefit of the community of inquiry approach may not necessarily be getting at the general population to consensus on an issue. So the polarization here was shadowed. Okay, if I just return to the initial question that we started off with, should we worry that conspiracy theories reject experts' testimony? I started off by establishing which level of experts is interesting to look at in relation to the question. And of the three levels, the general level is the one that is the most applicable one. On this level, however, it's unclear if conspiracy theories actually do reject experts, since we don't even know who they are. And so in that case, the worry collapses. However, on the second one then, what I started doing was starting to look at which reaction a conspiracy theorists should have towards experts' testimony to be able to say something about epistemic practice in a society, which practice is better. And so in that sense, the world's words fail me, it's afternoon, sorry. So I looked at two views, and one was the preemption, so to preemptively take over the expert's view. And I showed that the analogy for the empirical evidence for this view is misleading, doesn't apply to the experts' debate in conspiracy theories, at least. Actually, it doesn't do it in general either, so, but especially in this case. Rather, existing literature shows that it depends on the receiver's interpretation of the expert's testimony. And then we could have either objective or subjective. But if objective, there are no other pieces of evidence that matter, that's how we interpret the experts, then we should defer, of course, and accept preemptively the expert's testimony. But if we want artistic value subjectively, we care about higher artistic value, then of course we should update our beliefs rather than defer. So this in turn will make trust the single most important factor for the rationality of bracketing one's own beliefs and adapting the expert's testimony. And identifying the experts then just reduces to who we trust, who the community has agreed on is the expert. And then all said and done, is the worry well-funded? And is it urgent? I think it's unclear if they in fact do reject experts. And if we don't know who the experts are in the general sense, then of course it's unclear. But can we answer if it's urgent? Well, again, it depends. If our aim is to have higher artistic values and we have identified the relevant experts, let's assume that we have or we can do that, then we should worry that conspiracy theorists reject experts. It wants me to finish. Since the community approach would give us, unfortunately, zero artistic value, no improved artistic value at all. And so without having identified the experts, we can't tell if it's urgent or not. So it's an unsatisfying answer, but that's the answer. Thank you so much.